Good morning and a happy Wednesday, everybody. I know that the weather is indeed frightful outside. It's 36 degrees and raining, fit for nothing but ducks. But hopefully where you are, it is warm and you've got a good cup of coffee. So for today, I want to talk about one of the things that we as Christians can sometimes get maybe a little too uptight about. Sometimes we might tend to discount Santa Claus, and we need to stick with the real meaning of Christmas, and we don't need Santa Claus mixing in. So for today, where does Santa Claus come from? What are the origins of Santa Claus? Let's trace it all the way back. If you go all the way back, there was a real Saint Nicholas. He was born, we think, in the year 280 AD in Myra in what is now Turkey. Nicholas was orphaned at a relatively young age. His parents had been very, very wealthy, and he spent most of the rest of his life giving away money in particular to help the poor in his area there in Myra. So he was a real person. He was later venerated by, if that's the right term, by the Roman Catholic Church as a saint. So there really is a Saint Nicholas. He is the patron saint of children, of sailors, of wolves. How one becomes a patron saint of wolves, I have no idea. Patron saint of pawnbrokers. How does one become the patron saint of pawnbrokers? Who knows? But he is the patron saint of children, of sailors, of wolves, of pawnbrokers, and actually apparently several other things as well. So what do we know about Saint Nicholas? Actually, most of what is passed down about him is legend. And of course, with legend, it's hard to know exactly what is fact and what is fiction. So some of the legends. He is well known factually for spending a lot of his life looking after the poor, and working with the sick. One of the legends that emerged about him was that he raised from the dead 3 young boys that had been murdered there in Myra. I think the local butcher was supposed to have murdered them, something ghastly, and he raised them from the dead. He has several healings that are attributed to him. He is supposed to have calmed the storm once. He was, there were a group of mariners on a ship at sea. When a terrible storm struck, they were afraid that their ship was going to sink, and they started crying out in prayer. And there's the old saying, there are no atheists in foxholes. I guess there are no atheists on sinking ships. So they cry out in prayer, and Saint Nicholas appears on the ship with them and calms the storm. That's another one of the stories that is told. Within the realm of church history, he apparently was at the Council of Nicaea, which is probably the most important church council in Christian history. That was in 325 AD, and it met to address a growing heresy, Arianism, named for a guy named Arius. And according to legend, jolly old Saint Nick slapped Arius across the face. Whether it happened or not, we don't know, but so the story is told. And for our purposes, and what has the most relevance for us here at Christmas is this. The story is told, and there are several different variations of it. that there in Myra, where he lived, there was a poor man had 3 daughters. They didn't have anything, no money at all. They're barely getting by. He's got 3 daughters, and in that culture for young woman to be married, family's got to have a dowry. And so this guy's, his daughters are going to likely end up in servitude, in slavery, or even worse, in prostitution. Things are looking really bleak for those girls. And so the legend went. On the birthday of the oldest daughter, when she was going to turn marrying age, St. Nicholas dropped some gold coins into her stocking, either dropping them through the chimney or tossing them through an open window. But anyway, they had left stockings by the fireplace to dry, and somehow or another, either he slipped into the house or tossed a sack of gold coins into her stocking, or dropped them through the chimney. So she gets up the next morning, and there's in her stocking a sack of gold coins. When the second daughter, he did the same thing. And then on the third daughter, the same thing. The gold coins in the stocking, and according to the legend, the father was sort of, where are these gold coins coming from? So he sat up and caught Nicholas in the act, and Nicholas tried to run away. The father caught him, and Nicholas begged him not to tell anybody. And of course, the father did tell, and hence we know of St. Nicholas right now. And St. Nicholas, like I said, he was venerated by the Roman Catholic Church, so there really is a St. Nicholas for them, just as there is St. Peter, St. Andrew, all the rest. And apparently, St. Nicholas throughout church history has been venerated more than, I think, pretty much any of them except for Mary herself. The Virgin Mary herself is, I think, the only one that has been venerated more consistently than Nicholas. And there are just innumerable churches, schools, hospitals, etc., named for St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas was a real guy, and according to the legend, he gave gifts, gold coins, to these 3 girls to save them from what would have been a pretty bleak and miserable fate. So how do we get from that to where we are now? Okay, so that takes us to 1700s. Through the 1600s, the legend had developed that St. Nicholas would give gifts, either gifts or lumps of coal in the Netherlands. If you've been bad, you got a lump of coal in your stocking. If you've been a good little boy or girl, you got a gift or 2 in your stocking on St. Nicholas Day. St. Nicholas Day is December the 6th. In the 1770s, Washington Irving, very famous American author who wrote about Rip Van Winkle and the story of the Headless Horseman, that guy, he began writing stories about St. Nicholas, who flew above the rooftops in New York distributing gifts on St. Nicholas Day, again, December the 6th. And in the Washington Irving telling of the story, he was a tall man with big white beard and priestly robes, flying above New York, distributing gifts in a flying wagon. Well, not too long after that, in 1822, Clement Moore wrote "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." And in Clement Moore's telling, St. Nicholas is not the tall man in priestly robes, but he's a short, fat guy in big red coat with a sleigh being pulled by reindeer, distributing gifts all around the world on Christmas Eve. So how do we get from St. Nicholas to Santa Claus? St. Nicholas had been venerated by the Dutch, revered by the Dutch, and the Dutch abbreviation of St. Nicholas is Sinterklaas. That's how if you're saying it fast in Dutch, you'd sort of abbreviate St. Nicholas as Sinterklaas. And it's not a big stretch to get from Sinterklaas to Santa Claus. So yes, my friends, there really is a St. Nicholas. And St. Nicholas really did give gifts, or according to the legend, gave gifts. Originally, 3 sacks of gold coins into the stockings of 3 girls, so they would have a dowry and have a proper marriage and be saved from a pretty miserable existence. Twas the night before Christmas. We read it now. Even though our kids are far too old for it now, we still read it every year. And how many of y'all read it every year as well? 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutter and threw up the sash. The moon in the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below, when what my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles as coursers they came, and he whistled and he shouted and he called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the way, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As the dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky, so up to the housetop of his coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around down the chimney, St. Nicholas came with a bound. He is dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his sack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke had encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk and laying a finger aside of his nose and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night." And we all read this every year at Christmas Eve to our kids, to our grandkids. And yes, there really was a Santa Claus. St. Nicholas was a real guy. And when we carry on the legend of Santa Claus, there is an origin to it. St. Nicholas was a real person who was extravagantly generous with the poor and the needy, really was a saint who has been venerated by the Catholic Church for centuries, now for 1600 plus years. So, don't be ashamed to wear your Santa Claus tie or drink out of a mug with Santa Claus on it. There really was a St. Nicholas. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.